So I am just going for a walk and wanted to share some thoughts. I had this conversation yesterday. Somebody asked me about a training protocol that I enjoy, that I use with a lot of the clients that I've had. Frankly, it's very successful, and it's not a secret. I've talked about it before, but I don't think I've ever explained how or why I use it. And it's something called the 5-3-1, and this can get really, confusing because there's different variations of this. So I'll tell a little bit about where I learned this, how I've applied it in the past, and kind of how I apply it now. So I used to run a couple of different CrossFit gyms, and if you know anything about CrossFit, the constantly varied, functional movements performed at high intensity is great, but it's not optimal for strength gains. You're going to find a lot of folks who are just doing randomized workouts will see gains in strength, but not to the extent of somebody doing an actual progressive overload style, right? So if I wanted to get people who were chronically weak, which is, most of the people who walk into a gym in the first place, probably never trained before, or at least have never followed any kind of progression, we need to focus on strength. Otherwise, other attributes tend to grow by leaps and bounds. Their cardiovascular endurance is better. Their agility improves. Their power endurance improves. It's very hard to keep up with, especially prescribed weights in a workout when you're just behind on strength. In fact, I happen to know many of the top CrossFit competitors step away from completely randomized workouts for a good portion of their training year just to focus on developing high levels of strength that they can then take into their more CrossFit-y style of training leading up to competition. So doing some research and thinking about how to deal with this, right? And then B, you're also trying to fill an hour of a class because you're running a gym and you've got classes every hour on the hour, and so you want to have time to warm up, time to practice movements, learn new things, time to do a conditioning workout, and then, actually take a reasonable amount of time so people feel like they've invested something. So just from an economic business standpoint, you're trying to fill that time. And a lot of the workouts, especially if you're good at what you're doing in the CrossFit realm, are short. It's very, very easy to throw up, 20-minute AMRAPs all the time, 30-minute AMRAPs. But that's not the most effective way to train. So what we would do at my facilities was a good warm-up and then a strength portion. And then we would follow that with conditioning exercises as almost accessory. But that was our chance to do those very short, very high-intensity kind of workouts. And I love that style of training. It's not for everyone. It's not, and I'm not going to say it's the absolute best way to train, but it is a fun way to train. And I think people, especially online, everybody thinks they know everything about everything. But the reality is, we're all doing different things. We all have different obstacles. There's a big difference between applying a particular stimulus to a particular muscle in a particular way and what people are actually going to do. There's physiological limitations, there's psychological limitations, and you have to work with both. And so that format was very successful for me for a good number of years. But in trying to figure out how to do that in a way that makes sense, that jives with everything else that we were trying to do, I came across an article. It was written by Mark Rutherford. It was kind of a famous strength coach, especially in that realm. Very good, accomplished coach. And he had this idea of a 5-3-1. He called it the black box. And so that's what we ended up adopting. And the way that it works on paper is pretty simple. It's a 3-week wave cycle. So the first week you do 5 sets of 5. The second week you do 5 sets of 3, and the third week you do 5 sets of 1. And you're using the same lift the whole time. So we would pick an upper body lift, a lower body lift, and then one of the Olympic lifts, because we always needed to work on that as a CrossFit facility. So say Monday we would come in and maybe work on a snatch. And then Wednesday would be overhead press. Friday would be back squat. And so for 3 weeks, those lifts wouldn't change. But the sets would change. So the first week you come in and you find a weight that you can do for 5 quality reps. 6, maybe if you really dug, but you have to do 5 sets across. So you can't go all out, because if you do a true 5 rep max, you're going to completely bomb out and you're not going to be able to finish 5 sets. So you have to meter just a bit. And if you know much about strength training, sets of 5 are good for strength. It fits right in Prilepin's chart as far as effective sets and reps, the right percent of 1 rep max. But this is much more by feel. You don't have to have a clearly established 1 rep max to get a lot out of it. So you work up to a heavy 5. You take about 2 minutes between each set. You do 5 sets. There you go. The next week you're going to come in, and now the goal is sets of 3. So rather than doing 5s, you're doing 3s. So what's going to happen? Naturally, you're going to be able to lift a little bit more weight. Still, by feel, it's not by percent, right? It's not an exact science, and your feelings can change day to day, but you're going for something that's a little bit heavier than you did the week before. That's all. And now you're doing 5 sets of 3 as opposed to 5 sets of 5. Psychologically, you're getting used to the idea of being under heavier loads. The next week comes by, and now we're doing singles. Now note, I call them singles. It's a heavy single, not a 1 rep max. A 1 rep max, you can do once, okay? You're not gonna be able to do that for 5 sets across, just like I explained with the 3s, right? So you've got to work up to a weight that's heavier than your 3s, but you've got to do 5 sets across. And so it kind of limits your ability to truly max out, but that's not the point. We're just trying to get used to this idea of being under heavy load and kind of conditioning ourselves to be able to move more. At the end of 3 weeks, you've got 2 choices. One, you could take a little transition week, which is always recommended, or just switch the lifts. So instead of doing, overhead press, you would switch to maybe like a bench press. Instead of a back squat, maybe you go to a front squat or even a deadlift. You do something different for the next 3 weeks and you build up again. And then we can switch. We can go back to what we've already done or again, switch to a different variation. And we did that a lot when I ran CrossFit Twin Cities. We would switch the weights to, almost like a conjugate system where we were doing all different kinds of variations, not just deadlifts, but we would do, conventional, sumo. We would do elevated, deficit deadlifts, name a variation, like try to work it in there. And that's how we filled the calendar over the course of a year with a consistent strength program. But it was always a classic lift, like a snatch, clean and jerk, or some variation, an upper body, and then a lower body. And like I said, that works for people. The other thing that happens, especially in a gym community situation, is people have the opportunity to PR. I'm not forcing them, right? I'm not putting a gun to their head and saying they have to do a heavy lift or anything to that level, but they're able to come in and they're able to say, well, the last time I did bench press, I did my 5s at this weight, my 3s at that weight, my 1s at that weight. So I'm going to start a little heavier on my 5s. Well, guess what? I got a new 5 rep PR. That is a win. Go to the 3s. Hey, I outperformed my last set of 3s. It's a win. Oh, go for the heavy singles. That's a new PR. And then when it comes to a workout, we can give them something percent-based. Like this weight should be about 70% of your 1 rep max. People would have an idea. Now, is it a perfect 1 rep? Probably not, because that's not the environment we're training in. But it would give them an idea of how to load a barbell for a conditioning style workout. So that's the 5-3-1. You use the same lifts for 3 weeks. You condition yourself to that heavier, increasing load. You really focus on form. And you get to you set yourself up for a lot of wins. And that's what I like about it. And I've used this with people of all different fitness levels. But, some people are starting off where they can't even do a single push-up. Probably need to work on that first, okay? Like you got to walk before you can run. But if you can do, good air squat and we can add load, you can do goblet squats, dumbbell squats, you get to a barbell. You earn your way up to the weight of a barbell. If you've already got a pretty decent squat, we can start a little higher, that's all. But you've got to focus on quality movement throughout the whole thing. The second part about this, and this is something that I picked up working with Bobby Maximus, worked with the guys at Westside Barbell. Jason Gusick is really good at this stuff. Using the lifts as a diagnostic tool. So if you know how you're failing, where you're failing a lift, or not even failing, but where your form is breaking down, especially as you're slowly approaching difficult levels, you start to see like, gosh, every time I start to fail at a bench, it's near lockout. Well, that should tell you your triceps need work. If you're failing on your chest, it's much more of like chest, upper back may need work. So you need somebody who can diagnose that. But that's where individually, as you're going through this, you can design your own accessory work that's geared toward you and your needs. So it isn't a cookie cutter approach, but we're all going to come in. If we do this as a group, we'll all work on, do our warm up, work on our technique, right? As part of that warm up, we'll do our 5 sets of 5, and I'll say, where was it hard? You say, well, I'm having a hard time at lockout. Great. We're going to do a bunch of tricep work to chase that. And then we can do kind of whatever we want after that. We can do some conditioning work. We can do some fun workouts, some challenges. But that's the gist of it. And one-on-one, when I'm working with clients, it's a great place to start. Because the first time, let's say somebody's never bench pressed before, it's an opportunity now to get under the bar and get some reps. Just get some practice. We're not pushing the load here. I'm not trying to, like I said, I don't want to see their veins popping out. I want to see them do 5 good lifts, and it's maybe going to be too light, if anything. But that next week, it's going to be a little heavier, and the next week, it's going to be a little heavier. And if we go back and we do it again, we're going to start a little heavier than where we were. And this is about where you are 6 months from now, where you are a year from now, 2 years from now, if you continue to show up and be consistent. And that's really the magic of the thing, is it gives you those wins. It gives you those psychological victories because you do see the progress. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't promise you major changes in 6 weeks, but you do start to feel it. You feel like you're accomplishing something. And I think that's really important. I think it's good for people's motivation. And I think that's the right way to work. And name somebody who wouldn't benefit from a little bit more strength. Now, if you're a power lifter, if you've never lifted before and you're trying to get into it, it's a good place to start as any. But if you're a power lifter, all you care about is that one heavy lift. I would put a lot more of my effort into that than I would into the lower percentages. I would make that the priority. If you're an Olympic weightlifter, then everything is in service of doing the classic lifts. If you're a gymnast, your 1 rep maxes aren't as important. But perhaps if strength is lagging, it's something you could do to address it. So all of this stuff can be applied to an individual. Even if you're an out-of-shape, middle-aged mom who's just trying to get her mom bod back after, a lifetime of having kids and working behind a desk, I want thicker bones. I want stronger muscles, Maybe you do want to lose some weight. It's a hell of a lot easier to do that when you've got muscle mass. And this, like I said, it's as good a place as any to start. So those are my thoughts on a 5-3-1. Hope you enjoy this video. I don't know if anybody's ever going to watch this stuff, but I definitely want to do a lot more on this platform. So I figured I was out taking a walk. Wanted to get that off my chest. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.